Well, John, first of all, a mix of emotions after that Coventry game. What's your take on it?
The game itself, obviously, we've got to have a take on that. Although it's not particularly important in the moment. We'd done enough in the previous week to earn the right to lose a game. And unfortunately, we played really poorly on the night. But I think there were so many mitigating factors to the performance on Tuesday night that ultimately I can forgive it and move on because we got the job done. And yeah, it was a strange sense of relief, I think. And then once it settled in, there was a little bit of joy. It's very, very difficult. It's very weird in a lot of circumstances in football. Even when we had success here in the first 18 months of the football club and won the league, I think you have a perception of what the feeling's going to be like in the moment. And with the stress of the league, you think that it's going to be this sort of euphoric moment, and it probably never is. If you speak to athletes or if you speak to coaches that have experienced it, it's never quite as euphoric as you believe it's going to be. And if we'd been speaking any time over the past probably 6 months about what it would feel like to secure survival, let alone with 2 games to go, I might have described this amazing moment and this feeling of unabridged joy. And yeah, unfortunately, you just don't really feel that. It was sort of business as usual over the past couple of days. A bit of a weird feeling. I think some of that is the fact that we did lose heavily on Tuesday night, but the other part of me, I think, is just the fact that we've got the job done. That was the task at hand. We've managed to survive in the league, and yes, I think that when we pick apart a lot of the challenges that we face this season, it's been a really big achievement, but also it's the sort of bare minimum that we expected of this football club when we set out this season.
You sort of said post-match that the players have sort of earned that right to maybe not lose in that way, but also lose because you obviously got 6 points over Middlesbrough and then Ipswich as well.
Yeah, I think that when I talk about earning the right to lose games, my contrasting, the contrast I would give is that when we went into the QPR game, in tight games, in the build up to that, in 5 games that we hadn't won going into the QPR game, we'd been on the wrong end of the result, wrong end of a set piece, the wrong end of a counter attack, and we hadn't built enough credit in the bank to go to QPR and do what we did. Post the international break, because we've been so good in those preceding 5 games before Coventry, we had earned the right ultimately in terms of the league standings to go and lose the game. Now, the nature of the loss, I think any other time in the season would have been concerning, but everything on the night, all of the factors, Coventry having gone up on the Friday night, playing with a huge amount of freedom, we gifted them the first 2 goals, and we were dead on our feet. I thought we were completely dead on our feet. The effort levels over the past couple of weeks had just been monumental from the lads, and we'd probably seen the effects of that by losing 2 of the players after 3 minutes and 4 minutes on Saturday at Leicester. We'd obviously lost Gus as well, and the cumulative effect of all of those things, plus maybe the highs of the previous week, just meant it was far too much for us. And you could see it when you were watching. The level was just far too much for us. Coventry absolutely dominated every aspect of the game.
A 7th goal for Adrian Sekic. It's not a bad first season in England for him, given that he is 21 years old.
Yeah, I think given he's 21 years old, given the fact it's his first season over in England, there's a lot of adjustment, I think, that it takes coming over from the A-League over to this country. And Segs, the other part of that is that he hasn't played every game, so he's been in and out, particularly in the second half of the season. So fair play to Adrian, because he's got a very, very good goal return. He's got a very good assist return, and the sort of numbers that he's showing this year were very promising.
It was 60 minutes in the legs of Ebu Adams as well. How much of a bonus is that?
Yeah, good to get Ebu back and get him back out on the pitch. I think the more players we have back, the better. That's been also a factor, I think, over the past few weeks. Since the international break, we got a couple of bodies back. Andre Giselle being one that's come in and had a huge impact. Keshi Anderson coming back is, for a short time, unfortunately, only has made a huge impact. So when we had options in those games, I thought we looked like a strong squad.
And then 30 minutes in the legs of Josh Murphy as well.
Yeah, it was one of those where we were weighing up whether we bring Josh on or whether we leave him on the bench. I had a conversation with Josh and asked him whether he thought it was better for him to get minutes based on the fact that we might need him at the weekend against Stoke, and he wanted to get some minutes. So if we needed him at the weekend based on other results, and obviously we didn't, then that was the decision making behind getting Josh back. But just nice to see him back anyway. Obviously the circumstances of us rushing him back and having him available have been a bit different than usually would, but really good to have him back.
Obviously, unfortunately, lost Keshi Anderson, but Josh to come in as well sort of fills that void, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does to a certain extent, but Josh isn't ready to start any games, and Keshi was ready. We saw the impact that he had in the games that he did start and how good he'd been. I thought that he was excellent against Oxford, probably our man of the match. He had a really good impact against Middlesbrough when he played, and very good to bring off the bench in a different position against Ipswich. So we were gutted to lose Keshi because he's come in and he's done very, very well. And one of the reasons we brought him in because he's a championship ready player at the back end of the season. And so Josh coming in, obviously Josh is a superb player. He's been brilliant for us over the past couple of seasons. But yeah, not ready to start games. So that made it difficult the other night as well in terms of those options that we have wide.
Is Gustavo Caballero in contention for the weekend? I know you said a couple
of weeks. There'll be absolutely no point in us even looking at that. No. So all of the players that are on the borderline with their injuries, we won't risk at all.
And then looking ahead to Saturday, Mark Robbins is Stoke City. What are you expecting from them? They've maybe had a little bit of a fall off and not been as strong as they were, but Mark Robbins' side are still very hard to break down at times, aren't they?
Yeah, they're still a really good side. I think they're littered with talent, and it's I suppose both sides are now in a similar situation with nothing in terms of league position to play for, but everything to play for whenever you put on the Portsmouth shirt, and it will be the same for the Stoke players whenever you put on the Stoke shirt. So an interesting game. The tension won't be quite the same, but I think there's, like I said, there's still a huge amount to play for both sides and for both sets of players. And Stoke are a very good side. They've shown that this season when they came to Fratton Park earlier in the year, they were absolutely flying. Obviously had a little bit of a drop off, had a lot of issues to deal with themselves, but any time you go up to Stoke, it's not just a cliche, but it's a very, very difficult place to go. And Mark Robbins' sides are extremely good, so we expect a good test.
Is there sort of a bit of motivation to put that 6-1 loss there last season right this time around?
I don't think that's particularly relevant. I think what's more relevant now is putting the 5-1 loss on Tuesday night to bed. We can't finish the season in that manner. And like I said, I understand Tuesday night. I can forgive a lot of what I saw on Tuesday night. I think we now need to get back on it, and we need to now not give ourselves any excuses. And the end of the season is important. It's really, really important. I think there's going to be a lot of players that have some opportunities now to show what they're about. And the big message from me to the players is that you're always being judged, whether it's by me, whether it's by somebody at the ground. You never know who's going to be watching. It's really important that you put a good performance on. It's really important you represent the club, and there's still going to be thousands of Portsmouth fans that come up and pay their money. So we have to make sure that we do our very best to put a good show.
And finally, speaking of the support that you've had this season, how good has that away support been from the lows of QPR to a high like that last minute winner against Middlesbrough?
Yeah, the support over the season, considering where we've been, considering how many games we've lost, has been spectacular. And I think that when you take into account what we've done over the past 2 years, it's been more losing than winning, and it's been more painful times than joyous times. I think ultimately, because we've stayed in the league twice, I think the joy has outweighed some of the tough trips. But it's never lost on me the amount of money that the fans spend, the amount of time and energy they put into supporting us at home and on the road, and on the road in the Championship especially. Some of the trips are absolutely brutal, and when we play on those Tuesday nights and those Wednesday nights and early kickoffs on Saturday, it takes a huge amount of dedication. So I'm forever grateful for the fans. And I think what sums it up really is that even when we lost to QPR, there was probably an angry and frustrated reaction, but I didn't feel it was over the top. I thought it was fair. I thought it was justified. I didn't think it was personal. And ultimately, as soon as we set foot on that pitch at Carrow Road, like I expected, the fans were in full voice, and it's ultimately up to us to send them home with something to be cheerful about. And I think 6 away wins this year, which is double what we did last year. So we have improved. We've got to keep trying to improve on that, and we've got one more game away on the road at the weekend to try and do it.
Cheers, John.
Thank you.
Just on the game, John, first, you sort of talked. Are you talking in terms of perhaps giving some other people a chance to prove themselves this weekend?
We've naturally, I think, got a lot of players that are running on empty, and we probably saw that at the week building up into the Coventry game. The physical output we're asking for Gustavo, for example, probably caught up with him. Terry's not had a second's rest, and whenever we've asked him to go again and again and again and again, unfortunately he broke down at the weekend. I think you've got players like Regan we've just had to hugely rely on and not been able to change anything, the likes of Colby. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think first and foremost we have to protect a couple of players physically because we're right on the edge and we've picked up injuries. So we have to be very, very wary of that. And then, there's probably a couple of players that I'd like to have a good look at. We've obviously got to protect the integrity of the league. There's a little bit of an advantage, I suppose, that the 2 games that we haven't got a material effect on the playoffs or on the relegation battle. It still means I'm going to pick my strongest side, the strongest side that I have available, obviously, and then go from there.
Will we see Josh Murphy again this season?
I don't know. I'm going to speak to Murph today and see how he feels about the whole situation. My intention with Josh was to bring him back if needed, and hence why we did what we did on Tuesday night. Now that we don't need anything in terms of the league on Saturday, I'm not sure what we'll do, but I'll speak to Josh and see how he feels about that, because he's also worked hard to get back and to get himself back in the position where I know we want to play games. So it'll be frustrating for him if we don't include him for the rest of the season. But I'm sure he'll understand. But at the same time, it's all about making sure that Josh is ready for next year.
Yeah. Sometimes with elite athletes, well, always with elite athletes, in the midst of achieving things, you often see a situation whereby they don't sit in that moment. It's always what comes next, on to the next challenge. And are we seeing that situation slightly, a comparable situation here with Portsmouth, amidst the success of staying up? What comes next? What happens from here on in?
I think there's a couple of factors there. I think that, number one, you're right. Whenever you speak to top Olympic athletes who've had that build-up, that 4-year build-up, they win a gold medal, and there's never that feeling that they think they would experience. And I think we've had that. I think we've had that when we got promoted out of League One. It was a brilliant night, and then the next day it was very much, right, we need to prepare for the Championship. And so I think naturally you don't necessarily get the highs that you think you're going to get. And the second part of that is, what do we do next? And how do we prepare for that not to happen again? How do we make sure that we maximise the 10-day head start that we sort of have on some other sides in the league and some of the other sides that are competing? And there's a lot of other factors to it as well. I think that there's also a difference between winning a league, getting promoted, and staying in the league. And of course, sometimes the achievements are exactly the same in terms of the significance. And the significance of this, the significance of staying in the league is as significant as us getting promoted, because we get to stay in the Championship for another year. But also, I think we have to look at it, and we do want to push them as a football club, and we want to make sure that at some point we're not competing for those relegation spots. And that, to be fair, I still think it's an achievement that we've stayed up, and I think it's a big achievement that we stayed up. But we don't want to be here every year.
Yeah, you said in one of your previous answers, the game on Tuesday was far too much for the boys. That in itself is something that needs addressing moving forward, right?
I think that we've. When I say it's far too much for the boys, it was the fact that we played those 3 games last week with the emotion of everything that had gone on. The squad, we hadn't had necessarily had the luxury of rotating the squad too much, so we've asked those lads to go again and again and again. Mm-hmm. Lost 2 key players on Saturday, and we didn't have, we lost players prior to that as well. So losing Gustavo meant that all of a sudden, from a healthy situation out wide where we could chop and change over a couple of games from, I think it was Middlesbrough to Ipswich, all of a sudden we lost the ability to do that. And it was I think a game too far physically. The big factor for me as well is what's happened to us since January in terms of the schedule. So I don't think there's any other side that have had those 2 rearranged games. I know the likes of Southampton have had the FA Cup run, and that's shuffled about a couple of other sides rearranged fixtures, but no one's had 2 games that they've had to rearrange. So the Charlton game and the Ipswich game have meant that there's 2 weeks there where we haven't had that break, and there's 2 weeks there we've gone again, and we've gone on the road to Charlton. We had those 3 away games coming back to Ipswich. Man, it was just tough, and that was unique for us. And I think that took its toll towards the back end of the year.
Yeah. So is there now a wider discussion to be had about the direction the club are headed? What do Portsmouth want to be at this level moving forward?
Yeah, I've spoken about that consistently all year. The conversation at the back end of the season is very much going to be along those lines. I think we've been very, very clear over the season, particularly in January, about what we wanted to achieve this year. We were openly short-term in our recruitment in January. We probably did things that we haven't necessarily thought that we do if you're looking at that long-term strategy of the football club, and that's absolutely fine, because the priority was to stay in the league, and staying in the league for us affords us the ability to sit down and talk about long-term strategies and talk about long-term strategies in the Championship. So it was 100% the right thing to do. And yeah, it's the conversation now is, how do we move the club forward? How do we move the club forward from the sort of phase we're in at the moment, where we've established ourselves for a couple of seasons in the Championship, a couple of really tough seasons in the Championship where we've scrapped away, we've got over the line with a couple of games to go on both occasions. But I think if we want to have ambitions to push them as a football club, then yeah, we have to have that conversation and see where we go next.
Naturally, that's going to focus to a great degree on resources, playing budget, transfer spending. Where do those conversations go, and how quickly do they move on when you get clarity on those sorts of situations?
I think that'll be one for next week. We've got the game on Saturday to focus on, and there's always been a plan. There's always been a recruitment plan for both levels.
Yeah.
And I think that it gives, first of all, the recruitment team clarity in terms of where we're going, level of player, and definitely profile of player that we want to bring in. Those conversations next week, I think, will take place so that we've got that clarity before the end of the season. And we have to make sure that we do it quickly, because the season comes around very, very quickly. Players want to move, players want to make decisions quite early in May these days, and they're obviously the ones that we're going to be speaking to are going to have a lot of suitors, hopefully, because that's the way we want it to be, and we have to try and be in front of the queue.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's expecting Pompey to battle with some of the sort of top end clubs in terms of the resources at this level. Where do you see the club fitting in there to be competitive, sort of in the hierarchy moving forward?
I think there's a few factors. I think that the obvious clamour is to spend, and there's obviously something in that. I think there's a big danger you spend the wrong way and it goes wrong. So it's about spending with the right, I suppose, everything underpinning that spend, making sure that we make good decisions, and then making sure that we have the right resources at the football club to be as successful as we possibly can with those players. And I think that if you, like you said, we're not going to be competing with some of the big boys, but if we have up the budget, how do we make sure that we maximise everything we possibly can from the budget? And that comes from making sure that everything around the training ground is as good as it possibly can be. I think we've got improvements to make here. I think it's making sure that everything we do on the recruitment side and the coaching side is as good as we possibly can. And that for me is probably more important than just the overall figure of what we spend. It's making sure that we spend wisely. It's making sure we spend making good informed decisions, and then we have players in the building, making sure we maximise everything we possibly can out of those, whether it's coaching, whether it's medical, whether it's sport and exercise science, whether it's having the right facilities, whether it's having the right data to look at when we're trying to formulate game plans. So all of that comes into focus, I think, and it's not just going to be right. We want X, Y, and Z in terms of the budget for next year.
No.
We have to get everything right underneath that. If you look at the best sides in the country, and the best sides, not just at this level, but at Premier League level, they overachieve their budget by having everything off the pitch and absolutely spot on. And we're getting there. We've made a massive push over the past 3 years to try and improve everything at the football club, and it's very, very difficult, because everybody here that's been at the football club knows that the football club going through what we did go through over the past 20 years has meant that we came out the other side without a training ground, with Fratton Park pretty much falling down, the threat of the capacity being reduced to 10,000. So we've literally had to build everything from the ground up. So even though we've pumped, the owners, sorry, not we, it's nothing to do with me, the owners have pumped a huge amount of money into the football club to update Fratton Park, to make all the improvements that we have, to get it up to that 21,000 capacity, and to keep it there, and to look at how we increase that as well. There's a huge amount of money been spent on that and the pitches. There's a huge amount of money been spent on this facility. Unfortunately, we're still behind other championship clubs, and we still need to push that, and I'm still going to push that.
Yeah.
And I'm always going to push that with the owners, and I think that's what they want and they value from a head coach. I don't think they're going to want a head coach and a sporting director that sit there and are happy with their lot and think, oh yeah, it's a good thing for the football club to be sort of bobbing around in the bottom six of the championship. We've had that experience now. I think I've had enough experience in the game to have a good idea of what it takes to push up to the next level. And it's a whole club approach. It's not just spending on transfers. It's a whole club approach. And that would be my take. We've qualified anything that I ever say about pushing for more with the fact that whenever I've been at the football club, what we've tried to do, we've actually managed to achieve. But like I said, it's been playing catch up with a lot of those other sides that have had, and we've been established for a lot longer than us. So we're starting from a really difficult position, but there's that willingness there to do it. The owners, like I said, you've just seen they're willing to spend the money. They've put a huge amount of money into the football club. We also want to do it in the right way, because we've seen the perils of clubs that have been in the Premier League, have won the Premier League, and now financial mismanagement means that, in Leicester's example, they're facing relegation, or they've been relegated. Sheffield Wednesday, obviously nobody wants to see that. And that's a really important factor for me as well. The club is in absolutely no financial trouble whatsoever. every single player and member of staff gets paid on time. Bills get paid on time. We file the accounts on time, and everything's right there. And look, these seem like small things, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen across the board. And the Championship is a really, really difficult league because of the levels of spending. So we have to get that balance right. How we do it, I think, is a real challenge, but we have to get that balance right between sustainability but also competing at the level.
Sure. I think maybe about a year ago, maybe just a little bit over, we sat here and talked about the progression of the spending, and some of the figures that were mentioned were perhaps moving from the Hayden Matthews fee to £2.5 million in terms of fees anyway. We then recognised it didn't quite happen. Is that the kind of progress to that kind of level that you see? Where do you see it? Do you see it going to those kind of levels?
Yeah, I think that last year it was if you look at the progression over the 2 seasons in the Championship, I think that the first summer that we came up, I think we spent just over £1 million in transfers. We took a lot of players that we thought would have that high potential for relatively low fees, and we took a couple of frees, and then we bolstered the squad with loan signings. We then took Hayden in January for about that, in terms of that total spend, for about £1.2 million. Last summer we had an increased transfer budget. The transfer budget was probably about 4 times what it was the previous summer. And we increased the playing budget as well. So there was probably a 30-40% rise in the playing budget. Unfortunately for us, I think through a variety of factors, least of all the fact that the 3 clubs that came up from League One just went and did what they did in terms of that spending, meant that all of a sudden, even the increase for us wasn't actually a relative increase. It might have been even a decrease. I'm not sure how to properly quantify it, but that's how it felt in the moment. So when ourselves, Portsmouth and Oxford came up from League One, we had 3 sides that didn't spend a huge amount and were battling down at the bottom of the league. And there were quite a few sides that last year were probably struggling. It hasn't seemed to be the case this year. We've been competing against the likes of West Brom, Leicester and Blackburn at the bottom of the league, and that's been difficult in and of itself. So that hasn't answered your question. The next part is, right, where do we go from there? And yeah, increasing spending is probably the obvious answer from where everyone goes to. I think we can definitely do it. It's about getting to a level that everybody is comfortable with, and a level that will work for us as a football club. And like I said, we can't just go, right, we're all going to suddenly spend £40 million in the summer. It's just not going to happen. But can we up those £1 million, £1.2, £1.5 million transfer fees? Can we up them? Can we get to the levels that we think are going to get us established Championship players with a bit less risk coming into the equations? There's always risk, by the way. If you look at if you look at any of the clubs that have recruited over the past 2 windows, there's plenty of players that fall into that £2 to £5 million category that haven't gone right. But there may be other clubs that can do 2 of those, so it doesn't really matter as much. And so we've got to be very astute. We've got to be very clever with what we do. We have to be right at the leading edge in terms of making sure that we get everything right. I do think we can go in that direction, yeah. So to answer the question, I do think we can get there. But it's about supporting that with actual evidence of how we're going to progress with these players, how they fit into the side, whether bringing 1 player in for that money is going to really bolster the side enough, or do we need to do 4 or 5? And if we do 4 or 5, then yeah, we're looking at significant figures, and we're looking at significant figures in terms of the spend, and also in terms of the wage budget as well. So it's a long conversation. It's one that we're going to have, and we'll come out on the other end, and hopefully we get things right. But just to stress, it's not as simple as going, we're going to spend, and that's going to be the silver bullet to change all our fortunes.
No, just on that note, actually, you look at some of your rival clubs which seem to be able to spend to that level, and the players aren't necessarily successes. Even in the sort of short mid-term, they're not successes. It does feel slightly with Pompey, you can't miss when you're not able to miss when you go to those levels. Does it have that feeling a bit somewhat?
Yeah, and I think that's when I speak about other clubs and whether they can do, if they could do £2.5, £3 million player and it doesn't quite work out. I think I don't think that Coventry won't mind me saying this. We've looked at Markello in January, and I think Markello ends up going for £4.5 million to Coventry. And when we spoke to them about Coventry on Tuesday night, their take was he's done great, been brilliant in the building. He was always a long-term signing, never anything that we were thinking about impacting if he had impacted the first team this year, then great. But it was very much with Mason Clark, Sakamoto, Thomas Asante, Esse, and Rodoni in the building with all the abilities to play wide, and Minjuk going there as well. Yeah, you can afford to go, well, actually, and of course they earn that in their position. They definitely earn that in their position. So maybe that's an extreme example, but yeah, there are probably other clubs that can maybe afford to miss. It doesn't feel like we can at the moment, and that's difficult because recruitment isn't straightforward. You can do everything right in recruitment. You can take players for the right reason. You can do all your background work. You can do everything right, and it sometimes just doesn't work out. And I can give you 1,000 examples of that over the years where players that are playing well at a certain level at a certain club, it doesn't necessarily transfer. It's not always transferable.
And your own position within this whole conversation that we're having, and you need, and being comfortable with where the direction's headed, is that a factor that you're looking for yourself?
It's nothing that I've thought about. My only priority now is to try and put forward what I think is the best thing for the football club. I made no bones about how much I've enjoyed being here and how lucky and privileged I am to have taken this position in the first place. Obviously, I don't want to sit here and I'll always feel incredibly privileged to lead the football club.
Yeah.
What I don't want to do is mix that with any sense of not having the ambition to push the football club forward. So I will be at times, hopefully, it's the right thing. I'll be difficult to deal with in terms of demanding more. And it's mixing that up. Eternally grateful for the chance to come and work here. But I think one of the reasons I think the club hired me is as a long-term appointment to try and push on further and further and further. And I have my ideas about how we can do that. And I'll be as clear as I possibly can, as firm as I possibly can. I think that's a good I think it's a good thing. I don't think there's any owner out there that would want their head coach and the sporting director not really pushing that. So that's just my priority at the moment, because I know how much the football club means to everybody in the city and beyond, and everybody that works here, everybody that's connected to it. There's been a huge sigh of relief, I think, in the past couple of days, because we've stayed at the level, and we know that's probably the minimum for the football club. And yet it's about how we kick on. There's nobody at the football club saying we need to be in the Premier League next year or in the next 2 years. But I think the fans would like probably a little less of that. A little less of the scare of relegation, a little bit more stability, and then can we move forward? Can we edge forward? Can we edge forward to become a side that has a chance at some point to compete in the top 8 now that those 8 playoff places have opened up? And if we can edge forward towards that in however many years, then I think that represents progression, that represents stability. And at that point, are we going to be ready off the pitch for the next level? Hopefully we will, but I think it is about just making that steady progress towards that.
Yeah, I don't think any supporters are asking for ridiculous spending, but they obviously are looking for progress. It's been a big topic of conversation for a long time now. But to counteract that, there's kind of 8 to 10, probably more clubs in the Championship who have got debts and real big spending to get to where probably lower mid-table. So that just shows you the challenge there as well.
Yeah, and it's the same this year. I think there's a little gap between us and all the mid-table sides, but it's not huge. I think it's about 6 points. There's a lot of clubs on 57 points, and that's a couple of wins. That's a couple of, obviously a couple of results here and there. And it was the same last year when we finished. I think we finished 16th, was it last year? And there were a lot of clubs down there that spent a huge amount of money and hadn't got those results. And I'd go back to, if you look at the examples of the best clubs in the country and what they do and how they've done it. They're obviously different to us, but they don't just spend money and hope for the best. It's always underpinned by everything else that they do at the football club, and they've built something incredibly good and incredibly special there, so they can sustain that success. And how can we work towards that? In the short term, it's been difficult because we've been very, very open about both the January windows over the past couple of years being really short term. We don't necessarily have the resources of those other clubs to do that at this stage, but I still think there's things that we can change, there's things that we can look to explore to try and maximise the budget and try and maximise what we get in the building.
Yeah. Just on squad planning, does having your Championship status clear, does that help with your out of contract players?
I think so, yeah. I think we've become a bit more of an attractive prospect for them. Probably one of my worries with the out-of-contract players would have been that going towards the back end of the season, if we hadn't stayed in the league, that they'd have had other offers from Championship clubs. So I'm sure they still have other offers from Championship clubs because there aren't many free agents at the moment. But I think with the lads that we're speaking to at the moment, the there's advantages, I think, for them staying here. They know me, maybe that's a disadvantage, maybe they don't want to stay here, so we'll see that. But there's advantages to them staying here. I think that the lads that we're talking to, so if you look at the 4 out-contract players, I think that Marlon, I'll be very surprised if he's not at the football club next season, and I'll be gutted. I think with Zach's playing the best football of his career, Conor Overy's playing the best football of his career, and I think Doz is as well. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think there's a lot to be said for what they know we can achieve here and what they know we can get out of them as a staff, and vice versa, and what they can give us. And I think there's a lot of unknowns that go into other football clubs, and obviously there's probably other factors, but I think that's big for, hopefully that's big for the 3 of them. I'd probably take Marlon out of that equation, because I think that's slightly different.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. Marlon died in the war, Pompey boy. It's probably he wants to be here, and the others actually. But it's the fact that their performances will naturally attract suitors, because out-of-contract players of that level that can perform, they're in demand, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's good. It's a good thing. It's always good to have your players in demand. Sometimes it provides some difficulties. Obviously, we sold Callum Lang in January because of the amount of demand there was for the player. There was probably a lot of interest in Josh last summer. There's probably going to be interest in players this year that have done pretty well. If you speak about Seggs, for example, Seggs at the age of 21, with his 7 goals, I'm sure there's going to be some suitors in the league, and maybe even the league above. That's something I think is a compliment to those players, and it's always a good sign if other clubs want your players. It's probably not if you're going through a window and no one else wants them.
Yeah. How much work do you see being required in the squad broadly this summer?
I don't know, but it feels like a lot. I think we need a lot, and that's absolutely fine. And I keep going back to it. One of the reasons there is because we didn't look to build necessarily in January. We're really open about that. That was the strategy. The strategy was, right, what are we going to spend our money on in Jan? We're going to spend our money on trying to stay in the league. I think we did sign Jojo on transfer deadline day. He was one that is definitely one for the future. But apart from that, we did loans, and I think we did loans, and then lads that are, with the likes of Ibu and the likes of Keshi, both over the age of 30, not necessarily players that we would have brought in on permanence previously, but if you look back at those 2 bits of business, I think when the dust settles, and actually even now, I would make the same decision 100 times out of 100, because they were pivotal in keeping us in the league.
It was just necessary, wasn't it? I mean, that's what required. You have to put everything else to one side, I guess. I know it's not ideal, is it? But it was just fundamental.
Yeah, we needed that. We lost Cos, I think, the last game in December. So we'd lost Mark to that ACL injury, the last game of December, and we were thin on the ground anyway in the middle of the park. And then the run of successive injuries in January, when we had, obviously Murph was already out, Minkyuk went back to Tottenham and then went to Coventry. We lost Harvey and Franco in the same game, and we were facing that situation where we just didn't have any wingers.
Yeah,
we didn't have any wingers going into the Sheffield Wednesday game because of Murph's long-term injury as well. Florian Bianchini was out too, so we were completely decimated in that department. And we had to go short term, so we took Millie Ali and we took Keshi Anderson. They were ready, championship players available to come in and play, and that for us was right. We're going to go short term. We're going to go alone, and we're going to go. We're not going to go a player that's we're going to try and develop over 5 or 6 years. We're going to go Keshi, who's ready to play right now. And I said, like I said, it was a necessity. We did it in the middle of the park as well with Ibu, and we did it with the loans. We did it with the loans that we brought in as well. The one player that didn't fit that bill was Jojo, but apart from that, everything was short term.
Perhaps because of that and the situation that you say, it's going to be perhaps a fair amount of work this summer. You're going to naturally have some excess fat probably needed to trim from the squad as well.
I think there always is. There always is. Very rarely do you get to the summer and not want to make some changes. Players are going to naturally want to move on. Players that hadn't had a huge amount of playing time are going to want to move on, and they're going to want to obviously progress their careers. That's absolutely fine, and we're going to take a view on players that we think are ready for the championship next year and players that aren't, and that is always going to be a conversation that every football club has. I think in the sort of stage that we're at the moment, there's probably a few more every year than we'd like because of that short-term nature of how we're going about our business. And how do we break out of that cycle? It's difficult. It's really difficult to try and break out of that cycle because we can't all of a sudden go, all we're going to do is sign 20-year-olds and build for the future. We have to get the mix that we had of experience, the experience we have in the side. There's no doubt in my mind when we sat down in the room, we went across the building to the academy building for a change of scenery. When we sat down after the QPR game, when we came back into the training ground, There was no doubt in my mind that looking around the room and seeing the amount of experience we had in the room was a massive factor in getting us out of the trouble that we were in. I'm looking there and I'm talking to Connor Chaplin, Marlon Pack, Colby Bishop, Regan Paul, Connor Shocknessy, to name but a few. So that was a really important factor. But at the same time, they're all, those players aren't necessarily the ones, the 22, 23-year-olds that you can develop at the football club. So it's getting that right mix and it's getting the right balance. And that for us is a real challenge going forward.
One person who's certainly not excess fat, but will have suitors this summer, Terry Devlin. Obviously, there was obviously the quite fairly public talk about January. Is it going to be a challenge to keep Terry Devlin this summer?
I think it probably will be. I'll be extremely surprised if we don't have to ward off some interest in Terry. I think he's turned himself into an excellent Championship right back. And when I say turn himself, Terry will obviously give credit outwardly, and he'll point at the development that he's had at the football club. Ultimately, he's been a pleasure to develop. He's been easy to work with. He keeps his head down. He works incredibly hard. Technically, his improvement is astounding. Physically, the improvement's been astounding. There is only one person in that equation that can properly make that happen, and that's Terry. So, yeah, I'll be surprised if we're not warding off some serious competition for him.
Yeah, I mean, we play the season time, and there's already been that end of season recognition for Terry, and quite right too, right?
Yeah, and we also have to look at that as a football club as well and go, right, what are we trying to achieve? And one of the things we've spoken about over the past couple of years is that player trading model. Now, I've just spoken extensively about being short term, but what's underpinned a lot of those decisions early on is trying to buy those young players and develop them. And when we've done that to a certain extent, we made a good amount of money off Callum Lang.
Yeah.
Terry, you expect, is probably going to be that first one that we signed for. I think we signed for 5 figures, and who knows what he's worth now. But at some point as well, yeah, we do have to take that leap and go, this is actually a way that we can sustain that spending at the football club. If we sell Terry for whatever it is, can we then go and reinvest that in 2, 3, 4 other players that are going to become the next Terry Devlin? So, by the way, I'm not saying we're going to sell Terry whatsoever, but at some point, yeah, as a football club, you look at it and go, that's maybe something we have to consider. Previously, I think if you look at where we've been in previous windows, who was our biggest asset in the summer? It's probably Murph, and that was one where at the age of 29, 30 we can hold on to. It's quite different. At Terry's age, it's probably going to be a bit more difficult. So we'll see how that progresses. But ultimately, yeah, it's not a bad thing to do as a football club.
With recruitment, you're not going to get everyone. It's going to be a hit, but you obviously then get the leeway of that. When you do get the hits, which would be Callum Lang moving on, and Terry Devlin would fall into that category as well.
Yeah, and we had a lot of the lads that we've sold over the past say 18 months. We sold at small profits, nothing that's going to really sort of be significant in terms of coming back into the transfer kitty or anything like that. But
No.
Yeah, the likes of Riley Towler, Christian Sadie, they're ultimately good bits of business. They helped us get out of the league, and when you look at their contribution to the football club, massive contribution, and then sell them to someone else who's willing to take them on. So what we probably haven't had is that Terry Devlin-like signing. I mean, Callum's the closest we've had to it. Slightly older, I think. I think sort of 4 or 5 times the initial outlay we made on Callum, and in the midst of that as well, had a huge contribution to what we did as a football club. And yeah, there's going to be some that you miss on. There's going to be some all the time that don't necessarily work out the way you do. If you can find 2 or 3 that work out really well, then yeah, that's ultimately enough as a football club to keep you going. And it's about reinvesting that money wisely.
And Terry's, his market value is sort of, not from what you paid him, but many millions he's worth now, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. That's nothing that I'm going to have to weigh up or summarise. I think that my take is I'd love to keep Terry at the football club if we possibly can, and if not, I'll be extremely respectful of what Terry deems as the right move for him. If that comes about, we're speaking in the abstract here, but if that comes about, and like I said, fair play to him. I think he's one of the better right backs in the Championship with a huge upside. That's the big thing about Terry. There's still a huge upside there. The kid's going to improve again and again and again, as he has done over the season, because the improvement this year has just been spectacular.
And just on your loanees at the moment, can they have longer term Pompey futures? Gus Carriero, perhaps, to start with?
Yeah, I think so. I think Gus has come in, he's had a brilliant impact. The shame about Gus is that I thought that he'd really built into his Portsmouth career. I think had a pretty exciting start, then in and out the side, and by the time we brought him back in, I thought he was having such an impact in those games, particularly when we were sitting maybe slightly deeper and looking to break on the counter attack, and he so threatening in the Oxford game, very, very threatening in the Middlesbrough game as well on the counter. Unfortunately, picked up his injury there. So yeah, we'll take a view on Gus. I think Chappers is out of contract, so we'll look at what that situation looks like in the summer. I think Adji was one of the loans, obviously had his injury problems. Then you're looking at Millie and Jacob, both under contract to Luton, so we'll see what happens to those two.
Yeah. Thank you very much.